Hey there, thanks for tuning in to Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and well, to celebrate the release of Ninjago Crystallized, the final season of this era of LEGO Ninjago, I've been making a series of top 10 videos and model showcases, and essentially all videos to celebrate the conclusion of a massive part of my life and a massive part of everyone's lives with Ninjago, the television series, finally coming to an end in 2022, with a sequel series and a new series next year, of course. But so for this video, we will be taking a look at the top 10 best Ninjago dragons. Now, of course, Ninjago has been running since 2011. That is over 10 years. With every year, we got a couple of different dragons. Some years we got a ton. Some years we only got one or two, but we always got a new one, with LEGO continually pushing the design forwards. And with so many dragons, I figured why not make a top 10 list of my personal favorite and what I consider to be the best LEGO Ninjago dragons out there. So just a quick overview of the dragons themselves. We started off in 2011 getting these particular dragons for each of the four main ninja: fire, lightning, earth, and ice. Now, of course, we got legacy versions with revamps of them in the far future, but that's really where we started. 2012 brought us our first four-headed dragon, of which we would get two more in LEGO Ninjago history, with the Ultra Dragon. You can see him up here, as well as a legacy version flying alongside him. And 2013 brought us just one Golden Dragon as well, because that was originally supposed to be the ending of the theme. Of course, in 2014, Ninjago returned with Rebooted in massive fashion, giving us the formidable Nindroid Mech Dragon, which is a really interesting one aesthetics-wise. And then moving into 2015, we got a really interesting aesthetic with the Zane's Titanium Dragon, where LEGO was actually experimenting with more brick-built heads and designs rather than the molded heads of the past. The Elemental Dragons continued into 2015 with Morrow's Dragon right here, a massive dragon, one of the coolest in my opinion, as well as Wu's Dragon, which was a really interesting design with a nice usage of some blades from the Bionicle Hero Factory lineup. And then moving on from that, we got even more elemental dragons. Stuff like Ninjago Skybound gave us our first hybrid dragon between lightning and water, although it was pretty much just marketed as a lightning dragon. We also got Lloyd's Energy Dragon up there, as well as a whole lot more. But then, of course, moving into Hands of Time, we got our first true fusion dragon and the Kaiania Fire and Water Dragon right here. A very interesting design that blends two completely different color schemes. And then after Hands of Time came the LEGO Ninjago movie. Like it or not, it gave us one of the best Ninjago dragons we have ever got in the form of Lloyd's Ninja Mech Dragon here. A really interesting one that blended both molded parts that were introduced for the dragon itself with brick-built detail. But of course, Ninjago continued strong after that, bringing us into 2018, where we got some of the dragons for the Hunted lineup, which was, of course, all about hunting dragons. So we have the mighty Firstborn Dragon here, the Stormbringer Lightning Dragon, we've got an Earth Dragon as well, so all sorts of great dragons over here. But the dragons did not end there, because moving in, we got Ninjago Legacy, which brought us new remakes of some of our favorite dragons. Like what I previously showed, we got the Legacy Ultra Dragon, which is the four-headed one up there. We also got a Legacy version of Kai's First Dragon, which is one of the most impressive ones, also debuting a specialized head mold there. But then, of course, for the mainline TV show, we got a specialized dragon for Zane here in his Ice Emperor form. We got stuff for the island, and for Seabound, bringing us all the way to Ninjago Core, which is like Lloyd's massive legendary dragon there. And finally, the four-headed Golden Ultra Dragon from Ninjago Crystallized to round up the lot. But now it's time to take a step back and figure out which of all of these dragons across Ninjago's history is the best. We'll be counting down the top 10 best dragons, so let's start with number 10. Starting off this list at number 10, we have set number 70593, the Green Energy Dragon, which was released in 2016 as part of the second Skybound wave, and retailed for $50 despite also coming with a catapult and small outpost for the villain faction. Of course, the focus of this video is dragons, so we are just looking at the dragon in particular, and wow, is this a striking one. So obviously the most impressive thing about this dragon are the way the wings are done with a metallic green finish. This has probably one of the most interesting wing sets out of any of the dragons that Ninjago has ever made, and what's even cooler is that if you're careful with it, you can actually fold up the wings like so. So the wings do fold down similar to the Smaug buildable figure, and what you can do with that is that you could have it maybe fully close as if it is just a landed dragon, or maybe if it's in midair, it's swooping downwards to get prey. This is just a really cool looking dragon in terms of the wing department. The reason why it is so low on the list is that this is definitely a very rudimentary dragon compared to a lot of the other dragons we get nowadays. The building techniques for the back of the body are fairly simple, although this did incorporate quite a lot of cool building techniques for the head and front of the body. As you can see here, they actually reused Big Fig arms, like for the Hulk in black, to make up the musculature of the front of the dragon, which is one of the only instances where this part was used aside from its intended purpose. I also really love the way the head was built, such that it actually incorporates a pupil for the eye here. It isn't just a transparent neon orange element, but you can see an actual hollow stud in the center there, which really looks like the dragon has a pupil, which is really interesting. Great parts usage of the Chima weapon piece for the club or claw piece right here. Whoops, just broke it off right then, but really great parts usage for this as the front of the snout of the creature there. And I also love the usage of the jade blades being introduced in transparent green for the actual build for the head itself. Now, all in all, again, the dragon is fairly simplistic, but I do like a lot of the aesthetic options. Now, there are dozens and dozens of dragons for Ninjago, so the fact that this even made top 10 is very impressive and really speaks to the set's quality. I love the inclusion of the dual split tail with stud shooters at the end, like energy is lancing off from the tail itself. Again, those wings are very impressive. Don't look super fancy from the top. In fact, the top is kind of just boring in terms of the way it looks because the wings are just super standard. But as soon as you look at this from the underside, it really has that wow factor that makes this stand apart from any other Ninjago dragon. And with that, we can now move on to number 9. At number 9 here, we have set number 70736, Attack of the Morrow Dragon. This was released in the summer wave of 2015 for Season 5 possession, and retailed for around $70 US. It also did include 2 additional small speeders for the ninja, as well as a very small build for Cloud Kingdom, but essentially this was the main build that you were paying for the dragon itself. Now this is really interesting, and the reason why this is just one peg above the previous one is just because of the shaping of the body. If you lift the wing up here, I really love the way that they tried to capture the look and feel of a traditional Chinese or Japanese dragon with a very long and spindly body type that really does accentuate the curvature here. Now, unfortunately, this is a very static model. It doesn't mean that you can actually bend it like it would in real life, or quote-unquote real life. This is all just one block that you move around, so the illusion is kind of broken once you try to swoop this through the air, but just by standing still and looking at it, I really appreciate the curvature being used for the body shaping of the dragon. And also the fact that these are mounted on mixel joints means that you can actually position the tail, kind of like what I've done to also mimic the curvature of the dragon there. Now, the wings are just mounted on simple ball joints, but they are done so in a great way, especially because they are produced as specialized cloth elements. That makes flapping and posing them really easy, although unfortunately, you can't really bend the wings down past this point because the legs are directly beneath it. Obviously, that is a bit of a restriction thanks to the way that the body is set up, but I guess you can sort of bend them backwards like so if you're trying to go for a landed position, but all in all, it is great because you can get this in all sorts of fun flying poses and really cause the wings to flap up and down. Now, the head itself for the dragon is done in a really remarkable fashion. While this isn't the most refined head we've ever gotten, I really appreciate the parts usages of the Cars bonnet hood from the Disney Pixar Cars movies, used at the front here in just a plain black. While the bottom jaw does feel a little awkward just mounted on 3 battle droid arms, I think it does the trick just fine. Shame it can't fully close up all the way, but this is about as much as you can close it, and that's really all you need because, of course, this will be roaring in anger or action for most of its time on screen. I also really like the very ornate large chair being used for Morrow's seat here. That is a really cool touch and definitely makes it stand out compared to a lot of the other dragons by just how complex and how ornate the large chair is for his almost throne on top of the dragon itself. Really, the only reason why this is so low on the list is because it is so static. For a body type that promises a lot of movement and flowing energy, there weren't any ball joints integrated into the dragon itself, and it really just feels like you're kind of flying a large block. Unlike many of the other dragons who try to capitalize on this shape and really try to add joints in between, this is just one large block. So nothing super fancy going on outside of this. It is basically a standard build with some interesting parts usages, but all in all, just the look and feel and aesthetics of this dragon as a whole really makes it stand out, propelling it to number 9 on the list. And it's kind of funny how these choices so far have both been dragons technically used by Lloyd, or at least Lloyd's body. But let's move on to number 8 for something a little different. And coming in at number 8, we have set number 70734, simply titled Master Wu Dragon, which retailed for $40 US. Not only did it include the dragon, but it also came with a small shrine build as well as a ghost rickshaw, but obviously the focus is on the dragon, although those builds were pretty substantial compared to this, so definitely I feel like the dragon itself would probably have been sold separately for $30 or $35 at most. Now, this is pretty interesting because this is one of the smallest dragons on our list, but size matters not. Size is not everything, and I think this model really demonstrates what you can do with a smaller Ninjago dragon build. So this was one of the first ones they did that was at a smaller scale. The Titanium Dragon that came out the year before was kind of the prototype for what this would become. I think my favorite thing about this is just how much character the mouth of the dragon exudes. As you can see, this feels very wise. It has a beard made up of Unikitty tails, it has the large tendrils staking out the sides, good parts usages of the Alien Defense Unit and Galaxy Squad guns being used in white on the sides to have some ridging on the sides of the head, and of course those white croissants being used as the ears is the icing on the cake. One of my favorite things about this dragon actually are the wings, which is pretty surprising given that I typically prefer wings that are made out of fabric, cloth, or vinyl elements. I am not the biggest fan of LEGO doing brick-built wings because I always felt that the fabric ones just feel a lot more realistic, but that being said, I think these are probably the best brick-built wings they have ever made, because they specifically are using the Hero Factory and Bionicle G2 energy blade element, using 4 of them to kind of form the curvature of the wings, which just feels very bulky and realistic to me while still retaining the feeling that this is a dragon made out of pure energy. And that really gets the point across by using these particular wings. I also like the usages of the golden Sensei Wu hats on the sides here, which are really nice, obviously adding on to the details of this being Wu's dragon itself. And while the side of the dragon isn't too much to talk about, I actually do appreciate the curvature being used here. It's got a nice dark orange belly that does curve downwards on the bottom and then upwards on the top, almost similar to Mara's dragon, but it can get away with being a static piece now because this is such a small dragon. Again, I do also appreciate it when Ninjago dragons have tails that you can actually pose. Having these on mixel joints is really great because you can really get this fully posed up in whatever pose you want and not have it just always curl if they're using the frictionless tail swiping system. All in all, this is a really well done dragon and definitely proves that you can make a fantastic dragon even at a smaller price point with an amazing brick-built head and all sorts of details in between. It's only so low on this list because the body is fairly simplistic in building techniques, especially compared to other dragons, but probably was the best they could do or the best they were putting out at the time. And there are a few wonky things with the way that the head is built, especially using the battle droid arms just on the bottom jaw there feels a little bit gappy and awkward for the lower jaw. I think all the work went into the upper jaw and nothing into the lower jaw, but otherwise this is truly a stunning dragon and it's so cool to see this as an actual LEGO set. With that though, we can now move on to number 7. At number 7, we have another mid-sized Ninja Dragon that also does belong to Lloyd. I definitely am not biased here, I just simply think Lloyd gets some of the best dragon builds, probably because a lot of effort goes into making his dragons, given that he is one of the main characters. And this is set number 70612, the Green Ninja Mech Dragon from the LEGO Ninjago movie released in 2017 and retailing for $50 US, which basically just got you the dragon plus a couple of other minifigs. So this is a very unique and honestly kind of controversial design. I remember when set images first came out, not a lot of people were fans of this, but I honestly was really turned around by this dragon after having it in hand, and it ultimately became one of my favorite dragons after starting off as one of the ones I was most skeptical about when images were first released. Now, this is a really fun looking dragon because it definitely breaks away from typical dragon conventions. It does not have wings, instead it has a pair of booster rockets. To activate those, you move this out and move this panel outwards, and then you can see the engines can be furled out from the sides. I'll do it on this other side here. So because it is a mech, it doesn't really need wings, it just has these large booster engines, which is an interesting design for a dragon, and definitely more in line with some of the traditional Asian-inspired dragons, which didn't really have wings and were more like lizards that soared through the sky, but it certainly was a bold choice to make for the movie itself. But what I love about this dragon is the color scheme and the way the head is done. So the color scheme here is sand green, which is a really unique color for a dragon. I think my biggest complaint is the tail, because obviously this is using the frictionless system, where depending on where you're holding it, the tail will just flop around, and that doesn't look too cool to me. You want the tail to be furled out and not just going back inwards, but everything else is pretty perfect, and especially the head. I think that this set achieved one of the best balances that you can get in terms of having a brick-built head, but also integrating molded components to make it look better. I think it was only outdone by one other dragon on this list when it comes to the head, and you'll see what that is when we get to it. But what I love about this is that it introduces a couple of different molds, such as the front snout mold being used here, but the rest of the head is just fully brick-built, and I think that definitely has a good compromise between brick-built detail and intricate designs, but also having a lot of detail being introduced with the molded components as well. Now, I do kind of wish that this was not mounted on a ratchet joint and instead was mounted on standard bars, because then it could actually be opened in variable amounts like this. It is just very satisfying and nice how these two parts interface with each other, and while certain aspects of the jaw do look a little bit awkward when it's fully open, such as the back of the jaw here, it definitely makes up for it by the excellent sculpting on the front of the head. What's also cool is that the neck can be moved up and down, which is nice because you can actually move the pilot seat, which does feel very cool when you move it around. And in addition to that, the spikes themselves can be angled in different directions, so you can have some of the spikes down flat, you can have them pointing up, you can have them really pointing outwards like this. You basically choose how you want the look and feel of this dragon to be, which is very nice. Now, of course, this does have a swaying motion in between the body itself. This is pretty much perfect to me. I wish that a lot of other dragons had just this amount of sway, because obviously there's not a ton of friction, so it doesn't move around. It doesn't move around too much like this back part of the tail and swing all the way front. This is a pretty good compromise, and all in all, this is just a really cool dragon with a lot of fun play features with the jets that can be boosted outwards like so. Just a very, very swooshable dragon. Once you have this in your hand and the jets are out, you're going to want to swoosh this around and really just play with it, and that's what makes a fantastic Ninjago dragon to me. It looks good, it's a great toy, and the head is almost perfect for what they could do at the time it came out. And with that, we can now move on to the next pick. And coming in at number 6, we have set number 71774, Lloyd's Golden Ultra Dragon. Released just this year in 2022, this set retails for a whopping $150 US. Now, a lot of people may be wondering why this dragon is not higher on the list. I have seen a lot of folks online calling this the best Ninjago dragon ever, the peak of dragon design, you can't get better than this. And while I think it's good, I don't think I would agree that this is the best ever. And let me explain why. So, this obviously is a very well-built dragon. We'll start with the positives. I love the way the front chest is constructed. This feels like a very strong and broad chest here that really does convey the strength of this creature. You do have some great hinging in between the body to really have that flow to make it feel aerodynamic and airborne. And I also love the fact that you can actually move both the front and the back legs thanks to the brand new 2022 Mech Ratchet Joint, which allows you to actually be able to add joints to even the largest LEGO builds.
That all is fantastic to me, and a lot of the reasons why I like this, and I think a lot of other people like this, is the color scheme being very gold is very impressive, and all in all, this is just a very cool looking dragon, especially articulation-wise. You can actually get this in different types of poses. That being said, there are a couple of things that I definitely feel could have been improved about the dragon itself. First of all, the wing function is pretty neat. You twist this gear here, and you can actually cause the wings to slide back and forth. But for the ultimate Ninjago dragon, for what is supposed to be probably the most important dragon story-wise, and the show has not come out yet at the time I'm recording this, it probably will have been out by the time that this video comes out, so maybe this isn't important at all. I don't think so. I think this is probably pretty important. I feel like brick building the wings and not giving it cloth wings is a bit of a miss. This is a very fun and cool function that is satisfying to use, but it definitely does feel a little bit sparse in terms of the wings. These are very, very gappy, and for the ultimate Ninjago dragon, I would have loved to see a cloth element or something much larger to be able to really feel the wingspan of this creature. But even besides that, if they wanted to stick with this function, unfortunately, because the function is there and these sets are designed for younger audiences, the wings are fixed. You cannot move the wings up and down, you cannot flap the wings. They are basically just stuck in this position, because then, if they were on a ball joint, kids maybe would have a bit of a harder time moving this back and forth. I personally disagree. I think that LEGO has been very, very safe with making things built for kids, and they can afford to maybe try to just push the boundaries a little bit. If they had this mounted on a ball joint, I feel like that would solve a lot of problems. Just being able to flap this would be really satisfying in addition to the feature, but because it's not and because it's fixed, does feel like a major con to me. The other thing that I think definitely could have been improved here are the way that the heads are built. Obviously, the set is on a limited budget, but for $150 and you're just getting the dragon, I mean, they probably could have afforded to make the heads a little bit bulkier. The way the heads are built is they are using the brand new core elements, which were introduced for the more juniorized style of Ninjago sets, and they're basically just mounting them on hinge brackets and calling it good. Now, unfortunately, that means that they are mounted very awkwardly. The gray brackets here feel definitely not very realistic. It really just feels like the jaws are just completely disconnected from each other, and they don't really feel like heads. And one of the bigger problems is that because of this, stuff like this happens. The lower jaw can get stuck all the way forwards, it can get stuck way too backwards, there's a lot of wiggle in it, and if they had instead brick built it in the same way that they brick built with these exact pieces for other dragons, which we'll look at later on this list, I feel like that would have solved 99% of my problems with the model, where from the front the head looks great, from the side it looks kind of awkward. And those are some of my bigger complaints about the model as a whole. That being said though, this unequivocally is one of the best built dragons we have ever gotten. It does look really cool. It's very striking to have a dragon being built almost completely out of metallic pearl gold elements. That is really, really impressive to me. I just feel like there were a couple of minor quality of life improvements, such as changing the wings and changing the heads, which would have made this dragon #1 on the list. The body, the legs, the tail is pretty much perfect. It's just the wings not being fabric and also not being able to move, and the heads just feeling a little bit too sparse and juniorized for what is supposed to be the ultimate Ninjago dragon, that gives this a bit of a miss in my book and puts it lower on the list. But then again, it is still at number 6 out of so many dragons Ninjago has done. It is easily one of the best. I just think there are 5 that are better. And speaking of, let's move on to number 5. Coming in at number 5, we have set number 71753, Fire Dragon Attack. This was a Ninjago Legacy set that came out in 2020, retailed for $50, and was a reimagining of the classic Fire Dragon from all the way back in 2011. Now there is a lot to love about this dragon. First of all, the wings are probably some of the best that they have done for Ninjago. Taking a look at just one of the wings here, you can see that this is a very striking cloth element, which also can fold up if you want the dragon to maybe be crawling along. The wings would be folded up like so, and then when you want it to furl out for flight, then you can just do this, and that is really satisfying to see. They really did also capture the incredibly long neck that the fire dragon had, which really does set it apart from other dragons. As you can see here, the main saddle can be angled back and forth like so, but then you can also actually have the dragon head be moving as if in flight, which is a really cool look. Almost looks like some of the recent House of the Dragons creatures with very long necks, which I think is a very cool look for a dragon in particular. And I also love how the claws are mounted on ball joints here. So when you're actually crawling this along the ground, you can actually position the claws the way you want them to and really have them act as actual limbs. The back of the dragon, as you can see here, is featuring some really good building techniques. I also really appreciate the way that the chest came together with these angled keyed orange or flame yellowish orange pieces closing up the chest, a layered scale pattern on the front of the dragon itself, which does feel like scales, and it also continues onto the underside of the dragon where pretty much no details were spared, where you really are getting the actual look and feel of the dragon scales itself. Now, moving on to the legs, I think one of the only big misses in the back legs is that you cannot actually angle the feet. The feet are not angled on ball joints, they are pretty much just fixed, so if you want to have this standing or crawling, you can't actually have the feet being flat on the ground, which does feel like a major miss to me. It wouldn't have been that hard to just add a ball joint to the end of this foot and allow the feet to be mounted on ball joints, but alas, they did not do that. Thankfully, the tail itself is mounted on ball joints, so you can really get a whole degree of motion with this kind of forked tail at the end here. And all in all, this dragon just looks really menacing, and I really love the plastic head sculpt that they invented for Ninjago Legacy, which does harken back to the original rubberized head sculpt of 2011, while still actually feeling very much still within the LEGO identity, and even having studs on the bottom there that allow you to add maybe fire bits or even a stud shooter into the mouth itself. Now, the only reason why this dragon is not higher on the list, because with all those mentioned, I think this would be number 2, if not number 1, but there is one glaring flaw in this dragon, and that is this. So, if you want to have this in a flying position, you have the wings splayed out, fantastic, you're swooshing it around, and the wings will just fall. Let's just kind of zoom out here and take a look at what that looks like at a further out view. Let's just move the wing up, and it'll just fall with the slightest bit of motion. You can't swoosh this through the air because then the wing will immediately fall down. You can't keep it aloft because after some time it will just fall down, and that is a big problem to me with just the way the joint was used. The joint is not strong enough to hold the weight of the wing here. And as you can see, I am not really doing much here. Let's get that back on. I am really just kind of very gently lifting the wing up. Like, I'm just kind of raising it up here, and that's just continuously falling down. So that is a major con to me in the way that the wings just simply do not have enough support. And the biggest thing that bugs me about that is that they very easily could have just mounted the wings on ball joints, used the Hero Factory CCBS Bionicle friction joint, and that would have solved the problem. The dimensions would have stayed exactly the same. Nothing would have changed, and you would have even been able to get more articulation out of it by mounting it on ball joints, because then you could actually move the wings this way, which you can't right now. That, thankfully, because it is LEGO, is a very, very easy fix to make. If you were to make that fix, this dragon would probably be propelled near the top of the list, but because of that glaring flaw, I just cannot put it higher than number 5, and with that we can move on to number 4. Alright, and coming in at number 4, we have set number 71746, the Jungle Dragon, which retailed for $40 US when it came out in 2021 for the LEGO Island Special. It did also come with a small boat for Zane, but pretty much this was the main build of the set. And this, despite being one of the smallest Ninjago dragons ever, is definitely one of the best, and it really deserves its place so high on the list. And let me explain why. So first of all, the Jungle Dragon has one of the most striking color schemes out of any Ninjago dragon, that being teal. I also love the way that the head design is done, such that one side looks fairly menacing and looks like a dangerous opponent, and the other side just looks really friendly and goofy with a tongue wagging out and sticking out of the mouth, and of course they really tried to capitalize on the prompt that this is a dog-like creature by having him raise his hind legs like so. That just looks really cute, and of course, having this tail wagging function, where I typically do not like the frictionless tail swaying function because it does tend to curve way too much around. The way they did this one is that they actually custom built it out of different Technic pieces, which allows it to not actually curve all the way too much. This is about the perfect amount of curvature for a tail. anymore, and it does tend to look a little awkward. But this is pretty perfect, and of course, you want to get that tail wagging feature for the jungle dragon, so this is probably the only creature where I will excuse and say that this is better than having mixel joints for the tail. Any other dragon, nah, put mixel joints in. But this is pretty perfect for this particular creature. The way the body is built to actually accentuate the way that the actual bottom is moved upwards is done really well. Everything is actually mounted on an A-frame hinge, which is one of the more unique designs for a dragon body itself. I also like that they have extra details like chains around the side of the leg, such that this was at one point chained by the keepers perhaps, but now has been set free, so I do like the inclusion of these chains around it. And even though the wings are brick built, and as I said, I don't really like typically the skeletal brick built wings, I think these make sense for a jungle dragon because, especially as we saw in the show, these are more like vestigial wings. They're not real wings. He doesn't really fly at all in the show, and you can very easily just keep them kind of closed up around the body or kind of treat them as just little bits of accent points and not actual wings, and kind of just treat this as an overgrown lizard, which is kind of what it is, which really sets it apart from the other creatures. Now, obviously, this did introduce a lot of colors in teal for the first time, which absolutely makes it a fantastic parts pack, and this is one of the rare times where I don't really complain too much about the way the head is built because of the small scale. For something like the Golden Ultra Dragon, having this particular headpiece being used and just battle droid arms to connect it isn't really that great. But for this, it's kind of excusable because obviously this is a much smaller scale. We didn't really need a crazy larger brick-built head for this. This is just pretty perfect for its scale. So really the only reason why it is not higher than number 4 is that because it's pretty small and there are just simply more larger and impressive dragons that we're going to get to later on this list. But as it is right now, this is easily my favorite small scale Ninjago dragon. It just radiates so much energy and character just by looking at it, and definitely is a job well done by the designers of this set. With that, let's now move on to number 3, and we'll move into the top 3 of this list. And at number 3, we have the earliest dragon on this list so far. This is set number 2521 Lightning Dragon Battle, released in the summer of 2011 for $80. Although this was a battle pack, so it also included a very substantial skeleton helicopter for the dragon to fight, as well as a spinner included in the set as well. So probably if the dragon was sold by itself, I would probably guess it would be around $50 to $60. Now, going into this dragon, this is easily the best of the pilot dragons, and probably one of the best articulation that any Ninjago dragon has gotten, even to this day. And let me explain why. So this sheer amount of articulation points on this dragon is pretty insane. So you have 3 different segments to the body, so you can sway it back and forth. You can also rotate it, so you have a lot of cool flight positions where certain aspects of the body are rotated, maybe like it's pivoting in midair, so it's turning this way. All sorts of crazy articulation. You have articulation in the tail, and obviously this is done via ratchet joints and not via mixel joints, because mixel joints did not exist at the time this set came out. I am sure that they would have used mixel joints if they were available when this set was out, because they wanted to articulate the tail. But that's not all, because not only can you move the wings back and forth, you can move them up and down on one axis and another axis. So you can really get a very flowing kind of wing flapping motion out of this. If you really want to get it into a very realistic flying movement, that is just very cool to me. And I love the amount of articulation being used here, where in this case the ratchet joints work perfectly fine because the wings are pretty light, so they're not in any danger of drooping down no matter how much you shake it. So now you can, of course, move these, rotate the wings out on this joint. You can rotate the wings up and down and back and forth on this joint, just really great posability. And you can also pivot the way the saddle is attached on the neck, so you can move that back and forth, side to side and turning almost like he's steering the dragon head in different directions. And then, of course, we have the rubberized dragon head mold, which obviously, I think that LEGO can do a much better job in terms of dragon heads today, but the printing on this is just really well done. I am a big fan of the way that this particular head turned out, and honestly, there's not much to complain about where this dragon is concerned. Even the wings can be fully folded up to actually be held against the body and then unfurled, and while they are brick built, and these probably are the weakest wings in my opinion, it definitely does look really cool, and obviously the best of the 2011 pilot dragons. I think the only reason why this dragon is not number 1 or 2 on the list are because of the wings, and if they made this dragon today, I feel like they could do something very similar to the body construction and the head construction, and just change the wings to either fabric, vinyl, or cloth, or maybe just make them a little bit beefier. Now that being said though, for being brick built, these are not bad, and you really do feel the aesthetic and vibe of the wings themselves, so even this is not too bad in my opinion. All in all, this is a very good looking dragon, easily the best of the 2011 ones, and set a very high standard going forwards for the future of Ninjago dragons. And this just looks incredible in flight or hanging on the ceiling as well. With that, let's move on to our number 2 pick. And at number 2, we have set number 71721, Skull Sorcerer's Dragon, aka Griefbringer from 2020, which retailed for $80 US. In addition to the dragon, the set also included a small side build for the Lava and Statue board game, so I would imagine that the set would probably be $70 on its own for just the dragon. Now this is easily the most impressive villain dragon we have ever gotten from Ninjago. The villains have not gotten a ton of dragons, and this easily outshines every single one. I think that the coolest thing about this is simply the aesthetic. There's just something very striking about a skeletal dragon being brought back to life that really has all the exposed bones, and you can see the rib cage down below. As we move alongside, you can really just see all of the bones that make up the skeleton of the dragon itself, and even the feet themselves, the claws, feel very bony. You can articulate every single toe, which is very cool, and funnily enough, the one dragon where it probably would have actually made sense to incorporate skeletal wings and just have it be fully brick built, they chose not to and did these massive cloth elements instead, which are so big they barely even fit in the realm of my camera. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit where you can just see just the massive wingspan this entire creature has, which is just very, very impressive and really just looks really good when it is flying above you. Now the Skull Sorcerer's Dragon has also quite a few functions which make it very fun. Pressing a button on the back here causes the ribcage to open up down below. This allows you to drop its entrails inside, or whatever this is, some sort of a glowing green rock inside of it, down on unsuspecting passerby. So if you want to, you open that up, that drops down, and if you're at the right height, it will burst open, revealing bugs that are inside. So that is a pretty cool and metal feature. When you want it to stay attached, you just stick it on, and there you go. That kind of represents the heart or life of the creature itself. In addition to that, the wings are mounted on ball joints, although the way that they've done them is a little bit awkward because they wanted to prevent people from being able to actually move the wings too much and cause them to droop down. They have built the wings on this particular Technic element right here, which basically just prevents you from moving the wings down further than this point. This is the lowest the wings can go, which is a little disappointing, although again, it is Lego. If you want to modify it, you very, very easily can. Just take these bars off and mount them with a slightly different Technic element. That being said, you really can still move the wings backwards and forwards and up and down to an extent, which is very cool and satisfying to use for a dragon like this, just to have that be flapping up and down. The flags showing the flag of the Skull Sorcerer Vangelis is also very cool, and of course, my big complaint here, as it is with all the other dragons, is the tail. So having the tail just be like this means that you can't really ever get it to hold straight out. I kind of have to hold it here, but if you want it in a realistic flying or even landed pose, the tail will just swing one way, and even if you just kind of leave it and let go, the tail will just kind of naturally bend in one direction or the other, and the more it bends, the more it tends to coil upwards. So that is just a little awkward to me, and I just really wish that they used Mixel ball joints instead of the frictionless tail wagging joints for this. But again, it is Lego. You can modify that yourself fairly easily if you want. All in all, I think the best part of this dragon, in addition to the articulation, because you can also move the legs back and forth, you can move this particular knee joint back and forth, which is really all you need. Can't move this, but that's not a big deal because you can do this, so that's totally fine. I just think this looks really cool, and easily is one of the most striking dragons we have ever gotten from Ninjago in a long time. It just looks so menacing and so cool how it actually is built up with the rib cage and the bones showcased with the dragon build itself. And all in all, that's what makes this claim the number 2 spot on this list of dragons. But there is still one dragon that I feel beats even this one, and we'll take a look at it right now at number 1. And coming in at number 1, we have what may be a controversial choice, but this is set number 71766, Lloyd's Legendary Dragon, which was released just earlier this year in 2022 and retailed for $70 US, featuring pretty much just the dragon and a very small side build. So what is so great about this dragon? Well, to be honest, I think that this is so close to being the perfect Ninjago dragon. There is one reason why I do not think it is the perfect dragon, but everything else is pretty much perfect about the model. So let's just start with the head and go from there. The head, I feel, is the best integration you could do with molded pieces as well as a brick-built head. As you can see, it is using some of the pieces that are actually in the Golden Ultra Dragon, which was a set where I really complained about the head. But instead of just attaching them on standard joints and calling it good, this head actually incorporates brick-built detail as well as the jaw, making this one of the most realistic heads I've yet to see from this lineup. And this just looks really good, the head feels really bulky, it has weight to it, it really does feel the most realistic that we've gotten out of any Ninjago dragon by having the head actually just have system brick-built detail on the back and then molded detail on the front. The white teeth being actually painted on is the icing on the cake here. Instead of, say, the Golden Ultra Dragon, where literally everything is just gold, you really do have the sense that this is a living creature with a dark blue lower jaw, you've got the white teeth, the green head. This just looks fantastic in general, and I'm a big fan of the way that this final model turned out. Moving on from the head itself, you also can see that the front of the body is built really well. I love the inclusion of these very large rounded elements which really allude to the strength of the build. Of course, this is using the newer style of ball joint which allows you to really move the front and back legs back and forth as much as you'd want, and you also can have that full detailing kind of snake all the way downwards to the back of this model, where you kind of end in the Mixel ball jointed tail, which again I really do love, having the tail being able to be articulated back here. And, of course, every single foot mounted on a ball joint, which is the way to do it because then you can get good standing poses as well. The set also has a very cool and very satisfying function. Twisting this particular element here allows you to cause the wings to flap back and forth. And to show this more clearly, we're going to zoom all the way out so I can really show what this looks like from above. This just looks really satisfying to show the wings flapping just like so. I really like how you can get them moving really fast as well without it falling apart. Of course, that was probably the limit, it just fell apart right there, but you can get them moving at a very fast rate, and the wings will just stay together thanks to the grip on the Mixel joints here, and it just looks pretty good from almost every angle for the wings flapping above. The only downside here is because of the function, the wings are not mounted on ball joints, and you cannot move the wings up and down like this. I mean, you sort of can because of the flex in the wings themselves, but pretty much you are stuck to just moving them back and forth in this direction, which looks really cool and is very satisfying to do, but I feel like they could have incorporated a function like this and also ball joints to make this the perfect dragon. But as it is right now, almost everything else is just a massive improvement over every other dragon. The front legs can move thanks to the new joint piece. The head is probably the best head out of every one of the dragons. Just with this excellent brick built and molded detail in combination with each other looks great. The tail is a Mixel jointed tail, so you can actually get this in the positions you want. Everything is great about this dragon, and that is why I am ranking it at the #1 spot, crowning it as the best Ninjago dragon so far, because there's still many more to come. And with that, we have summed up our look at the top 10 dragons. I hope you enjoyed. This is easily the best one, Lloyd's Legendary Dragon, in my opinion.
Alright, and with that, we have summed up my personal favorite and what I consider to be the best Ninjago dragons from the 11 years of LEGO Ninjago's history. Of course, this is just my opinion, and I would love to hear yours. Do let me know down in the comments below which dragons are your favorites. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And which dragons do you personally own? Ninjago has had a lot of amazing dragons over the years, and obviously Ninjago is not going anywhere anytime soon. We're actually getting an $100 Ice Dragon next year, which is really exciting to me. We've never gotten an Ice Dragon at that scale before, so I really am hoping it will be one of the best. And of course, who knows where the future will lead us with the new new Ninjago series coming out next year. Only time will tell, but so far that is my opinion leading all the way up to 2022's LEGO Ninjago Dragon History. Again, let me know, what are your favorites? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I would love to hear your thoughts. And thanks so much for tuning into Duckbricks. Like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Bye bye for now.